About 2 years ago, we got to test the Hisense U8HQ TV, which, thanks to its high picture quality and advanced technologies involved, was the unquestionable best buy in its class for those who want a seriously good TV without breaking the bank. I personally recommended that model to many of my friends, and oddly enough, it is still available on some markets and still just as good of a purchase due to its price dropping, while the new models are getting more expensive, but also the fact that newer similarly priced models did not bring improvements that we expected in terms of image quality. Last year's U8HQ, which was supposed to be a direct successor, fell short, perhaps not surprising due to all that was happening in the world over the last 2 years, but this year it seems as if Hisense has a better plan, the result of which is the U8HQ, a grandchild, so to speak, to the aforementioned Best Buy model. On paper, this new model is everything we have expected U8HQ to be, as it keeps most of the good stuff we liked about the U8HQ, but features some notable improvements such as Mini LED backlight, vastly better gaming features, new software and an enhanced sound system. Looks really impressive, but let's see if it feels the same on our TV shelf. Design-wise, this TV is a detour from what we've seen so far from Hisense in this class and looks more like a U9G or some pricier models by other manufacturers, certainly elegant and visually effective. The lines are simple and so is the color palette that combines black and dark grays, so there are no visual distractions to take your attention from the content you're watching. Aluminium panel frame is fairly thin when viewed from the front, and so is the base of the stand, which is made from cast steel. Below the screen on the front there's also a miniature integrated soundbar covered in cloth, which fits nicely with the overall aesthetic. The part that connects the panel to the base of the stand is designed with a plastic cover that allows you to neatly hide the cables. On the back, the outer 3.5 cm piece that connects to the bezel is also made of metal in order to reinforce the construction, but the whole central area is made of plastic, as besides all the electronics, it also houses a part of the sound system, specifically a subwoofer opening in the middle and a top speaker on the top of the back of the TV. Typical for Hisense, the connectors are separated into two sections, a small one accessible from the back that holds only a LAN port, optical audio output and a single USB, while the rest of the connectors are in a larger section accessible from the side. In it you will find a headphone jack, composite AV input via a 3.5mm adapter, antenna and satellite connectors, CI Plus slot, USB with 1A power for external hard drives, service port and 4 HDMIs. This last bit is where Hisense has finally fixed one of the biggest complaints we've had for its previous models, implementing a fully capable HDMI 2.1 with 4K 120Hz and variable refresh rate that is supported both on consoles and Nvidia and AMD graphics cards on PC. Beware though, since that only goes for 2 of 4 ports, and it's HDMI 3 and 4, while HDMI 1 and 2 are still version 2.0b. The fact that not all 4 ports are HDMI 2.1 is not a big deal, but Hisense should have put the new ports first, as this is likely to confuse users who do not read the small print and assume that HDMI 1 is always the best option, and let's be real, that's most of us. We have to praise how well this TV performs for gaming, as it was a real joy to try out some of the PC games in 4K with 120Hz refresh rate, G-Sync and HDR. Everything ran smoothly with really good gaming experience. Also, we measured the input lag at decent 15.7 milliseconds at 60 Hz, so it is to be expected that it gets much lower than that at maximum refresh rate. Good impression in games was also helped by the fact that the panel is IPS type, so the response time was much better than on U8HQ or other VA-based models. Speaking of the panel type, we should note that it is actually an ADS or Advanced Super Dimension Switch subvariant of IPS technology developed by Chinese BOE, which has some theoretical advantages over the standard IPS. Those include an improved mechanical rigidity, but more importantly faster response times due to the way matrix is polarized, as well as up to 15% more brightness due to the use of indium tin oxide, which makes the control transistor layer more transparent, but also makes the panel more expensive to produce. So how do these advantages play out in reality? Well, as soon as we took the first static contrast measurements, it was clear that this is an above average quality IPS panel, since the measured contrast was 1485 to 1. Viewing angles were great as expected, but what ADS also inherited from IPS was a slight IPS glow, which you may notice in some situations on a dark screen. We're used to Hisense U8 series being equipped with an advanced backlight system, and in this case it is Mini LED, which has finally found its way into this price bracket on Hisense TVs. It is a backlight with 160 local dimming zones, which is halfway between 180 zones on U8QF and 120 on U8HQ, but with a more advanced technology. One of the main advantages of Mini LED over direct LED is a better uniformity due to a larger number of smaller diodes, and you will notice that on this model right away, as the uniformity is very good, especially compared to previous models. Second big advantage should be higher brightness, since the diodes are closer to the panel and there's no need for the diffuser, and when you combine that with the 15% we mentioned brought by ADS, the end result is a maximum brightness which we've measured at 1913 nits in HDR mode with 10% screen coverage, which is really impressive. In fact, brightness is pretty high on various screen coverage percentages and ranges from 989 nits at 1% to 1155 nits at 50% coverage, and only at 100% the limiter gets a bit more aggressive and drops it to 670 nits. Plus, it reaches 850 nits in SDR sports mode, so it is definitely a very bright TV when you need it to be, which is ideal for viewing in very bright rooms. At the other side of the brightness spectrum, IPS, even when coupled with Mini LED and good local dimming, is not quite capable of competing with similar VA-based models. Even though local dimming can completely turn off the light in each of the zones, the IPS glow we've mentioned, as well as naturally higher black level of IPS, which in this case ranges between 0.22 and 0.59 nits, limits the performance, so the black level at the edges of bright objects, especially when viewed from the side, is noticeably higher than on a black background and produces a so-called blooming effect. How bad is it? Well, it is certainly a small improvement over last year's model, but it is not almost unnoticeable like on U8QF. To be fair, due to the really high maximum brightness, which is higher than on both previous models, effective contrast is still very good, so even though it uses a similar panel type, this TV is a big step up over the last year's model in terms of display quality. As for the color reproduction, the panel achieves 10 bits per color channel with the use of FRC and manages to cover 90.9% of DCI-P3 gamut, according to our measurements, solid for a quantum dot panel. On the other hand, factory color calibration is not impressive, so the best delta E deviation was measured in HDR day mode at 5.5 and SDR filmmaker mode at 6.5. Not terrible, but we've seen much better from Hisense. Interestingly, we got the impression that this year Hisense has decided to change the approach to color science on their TVs a bit, so the overall look was less like the Samsung saturated perked up style and more like what we usually see on Sony TVs, calmer, not as exciting, but more realistic. Some of you may like this, others may not, so whether this is an improvement or not will depend on your personal visual taste. Still, those who prefer a visually more attractive display may find it by using dynamic mode and changing the color temperature to warm 2 and adjusting sharpness and other options to taste. The most realistic image besides Cinema Day and HDR Day modes is offered in Filmmaker mode, which is available in SDR and HDR, as well as in IMAX Cinema mode, available only in HDR. Video processing, which is the other part of the image quality equation, seems to be also improved over the previous models, both in terms of algorithms and performance. The reason is that this TV is run by a new MediaTek MT9000, a company's flagship chipset that is created for 8K processing, has AI capabilities, hardware AV1 decoder, support for HDMI 2.1a with full 48 gigabits per second bandwidth, and a few more useful features. Motion processing, or MEMC, works very well, and we haven't noticed any freezes or stutter as on some previous models during scene changes, although there were some minor artifacts at the edges of fast-moving objects when using the smoothest mode, which is to be expected. Besides the smooth mode, which is not quite the soap opera style fluid, but is very smooth, there are also clear mode, film that offers a more natural cinematic motion, and custom mode that you can adjust to taste with two sliders that reduce judder and blur. Even though there's no dedicated sports mode in MEMC, we liked how the 50 FPS sport broadcast looked both on clear, which is default in sports picture mode, and with a de-blur slider maxed out and the judder all the way down, which resulted in a very clearly and cleanly presented action. We've mentioned the AI image processing, and it is activated by engaging the Smart Scene option, which recognizes the content that's being played and adjusts different display parameters to better fit the scene. The effect of this is rather subtle, so in most cases you won't really notice a significant difference, especially since the tone mapping is decent. Speaking of which, U8HQ supports practically all current HDR formats. Standard HLG and HDR10, HDR10 Plus and Dolby Vision with dynamic tone mapping, as well as their improved versions HDR10 Plus Adaptive and Dolby Vision IQ, which take room light into account. Very rich support, so you can watch pretty much any HDR content without transcoding. Overall, U8HQ is a pretty capable TV image-wise, even if it is not perfect on all accounts, and the same can also be said about its sound. We've already mentioned that the sound system on this TV consists of a soundbar right below the panel that directly projects the sound to the front, plus a subwoofer on the back and a top speaker that is there to make the most out of surround formats like Dolby Atmos. In numbers, that means 4 × 10 watts, 2 × 5 watts and 20 watts for the woofer, 70 watts of power in total. As for the sound quality, the first impression was more than positive, perhaps not an ideal frequency response, but subjectively pleasant to listen to. Tweaking the options in the sound menu, we found that this was the case only when the DTS Virtual X processing was active, since without it, even if you engage Dolby Atmos, the sound seemed to be missing a large portion of mid-range. DTS X brings back all the mid-range in the right amount, plus additionally tightens the bass, so it is practically a necessity on this model for a good sound experience, especially for listening to music. The TV has quite an impressive bass response that reaches all the way down to 20 Hz, even if the loudness drops slowly below about 50 Hz. In any case, a very convincing sound with a good soundstage and plenty of loudness. As for the other sound-related options, there's an 7-band equalizer, additional bass boost slider, automatic loudness control, and an option to correct the frequency response in case you're mounting a TV on the wall. For the smart features on U8HQ, as on most of its models, Hisense relies on VidaU platform, in this case in its latest edition, the version 6.0, which has been further refined and improved over the already quite good 5.0. The interface is visually sleek and optimized, so we dare say that this is currently one of the better looking smart TV platforms, even if its features are not on par with Android TV and not quite on par with Tizen or WebOS either. At the top of the screen there's a banner that is used as a context display related to an app that you select from the list right under it, below which are the lines with content suggestions organized in different categories, for example music, kids, family, etc. It would have been nice if these categories were customizable, so maybe that's something that Hisense should consider for the next version. One thing that unfortunately hasn't changed in the VidaU is the app selection, so you get pretty much the same apps that were available on the last year models with VidaU 5.0. Most of the useful video and audio streaming services are available, but HBO Go is still missing, as well as some local cable providers' apps. The good thing is that there is plenty of free content to watch, both through the Plex app and through VidaFree, which aggregates viewing suggestions from different free video services. If you are one of those who like to leave their TV on all the time, Vida Art feature will turn the TV into a room decoration by displaying various artwork when the TV is not in use. While most other manufacturers offer a similar feature but with a focus on classic or modern art, Vida Art is a collaboration with DeviantArt and offers an interesting selection of digital art that is more unconventional compared to what others are doing. The biggest change this year seems to be related to controlling the TV, since there's a new redesigned remote that we like less than the previous models, both visually and in terms of quality, but that is actually better designed and more practical. It is a bit larger in size, with a plastic housing and with keys that are a mix of quality ones with a precise click on the upper half of the remote from direction keys up and flimsier rubber keys below that. Most significant change are the app shortcut keys, which have been expanded to 12 keys, and we must say that even though it may look excessive, it actually is really useful since it minimizes the need for going through the menu, as most user apps are just a click away. TV and the remote also support voice control via VidaU's own voice assistant that works quite well, albeit with a limited language support if you're not using English or one of the more popular languages. It allows you to search for certain content, but also do things like quickly set the volume to a specific percentage. Another welcome improvement is the addition of Vida mobile app, which allows you to use your smartphone as a TV remote, start apps, share content, create playlists, and easily set up your TV on first use. Very well thought out. All in all, Hisense U8HQ is a good step forward for U8 series, and even though it does not beat the popular U8QF in terms of pure image quality, it is still good in that regard, but brings some significant improvements regarding image processing, sound quality, software, and perhaps the most in terms of gaming features. In sports terms, an all-round player. We'd like to especially emphasize the gaming aspect, as it is one of the best models we've tested for that purpose in its class. As for the price, 65-inch version can currently be found in Europe for around €1,000, which makes it a good offer among this year's models with comparable features. Some of the models left over from 2021 or even 2020 can still be a better buy at significantly discounted prices. That would be all for this video. We hope you found it useful and informative, and if you have, please leave a like and consider subscribing to our channel for more interesting tech content. You were watching Bench House, my name is Ivan, and I'll see you next time.